Today is May 31st, 2007. We're at Lowell High School interviewing Leo Pfaller. He was born on July 9th, 1933, and is a resident of Lowell at 725 Bowes Road. My name is Miranda, and I will be interviewing Mr. Pfaller while Alex Brock and Kristen Nagy record. Now we will start the interview. What was your childhood like?
My childhood was, I would say we were low middle class, poor, really didn't even know it because we were a happy family. And I graduated from Lowell High School. All my elementary through 12th was at Lowell, and it was a good relationship. We had about 30 students in the class. We graduated as 66 students in 1951.
Can you tell us about your father and mother?
My father was an immigrant from Germany. He was originally sponsored to a relative in South Dakota, and he got an application to be a miller, and he came to King Milling Company in Lowell, and he worked there for many years, and then transferred to Runciman Bean plant, and then he retired from Amway in about 1970.
And your mother?
My mother was from Harriet, South Dakota, and she was the same age as my father, and she was a farm girl, and she eventually married my father in 1927, and they moved back to Lowell, and I guess that was about it,
Did you have a good relationship with your family?
Oh yes, very good relationship. We were a very loving family, and they were very supportive of anything we did, and if we screwed up, we paid the price.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I had one brother, Jerome. He was 4 years older than I was. We got along fairly well. I only broke his nose once, and when he asked for a hammer, and I was about 8 years old and didn't want to get it, so I hit him with the side of my fist right smack in the middle of his nose, flattened it out. And other than that, we get along fine. He now lives in Toledo, and we see each other, fairly often.
How did you do in school?
I was in, just out of the top 10 in my class. I was very small. I graduated at 5'1" and about 98 pounds. And I was in a few athletics. My annual has a couple items in there, which I was in tennis and other activities in the play cast and class officer for 3 of the 4 years. And basically, I just had a good time in school.
Could you tell us about your marriage?
Marriage is fine. I was in service, went into service in February of 1954, and we were married July 10th, 1954. My wife stayed at home, and I visited her every weekend, even though we weren't supposed to go farther than 50 miles from Fort Knox, where I was stationed, until I completed all my training and my tank training. And then she stayed with her folks, and I went to Texas and stayed there the remainder of my military career.
Do you have any children?
We have 3 boys. The first one was John, and he died at 12 years of medical problems. And then Robert was born in 1957, and James was born in 1959. They are presently living in the Lowell area, and one is a salesman. Bob is a salesman from Williams Distributing, which sells kitchens, cabinets, doors, windows, and such. And Jim is gainfully employed with Cisco Incorporated as a food service company out of Grand Rapids.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted. I was presently in college, and in 1953 I was told that I would get no college deferment. So then I was checked with my draft board, and I was due to go in October October, I didn't go in, I didn't get a call. I checked with them and they said, well, somebody had advanced their draft so that they could go in and get it over with. Well, that went on through November and December. And I received my notice then to report in December, and I became engaged to my wife December 21st, and then I finally went in February to do my active duty.
How did you choose the branch?
My branch?
Yeah.
Oh, it was armor. When I went in, we had to signify or state what we wanted to do. And my first choice was I wanted to be in the Seabees. My second choice was I wanted to be in some engineering or type of construction like that. And my third choice was already stamped in by the military, and that said armor. And that's where I was assigned, is to armor.
Where were you living at the time?
Before I went in?
Yeah.
Oh, I was living with my folks in Lowell.
What war were you drafted into?
I was drafted into the Army on that, and like I say, I went directly to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training, completed my basic training, and then I was assigned to armor. And I did 10 weeks in armor training, and I was just selected as a tank commander to stay to train the next group that came in for tanks, tank training. And then we we completed another 10 weeks of training with the young ones, and then we went to Fort Hood, Texas.
What was training like for you?
Training was fine, just had to do what I was told and didn't try to screw up.
How did you get through it? Just by...
Oh, it was, physically challenging and mentally challenging, but I didn't find it a problem.
Do you have any stories of training?
Stories of training? I guess when I got to be a tank commander training my crew, we had a driving expedition or exercise one day, and it had rained, and Kentucky is very notorious for its clay soil. And we took these big 48-ton tanks out, and it was about 5 football fields of flat clay that had been rained on. So we took those tanks out and teaching the trainees how to drive, and it was very fun to put it in neutral steer and spin the tank around. When we were taking our tanks out to a 90-millimeter range, we had completed our firing, and we were on our way back to the base to clean up our tanks, and one of the tanks about 10 ahead of me had a hatch break, and it took the top of the tank commander's head right off when it slammed down on that. And other than that, there wasn't anything major that I was aware of.
Did you feel any pressure or stress?
I didn't feel any pressure or stress. Maybe there was, but I just had to live with it. It was just another job.
How did people entertain themselves?
Oh, when we had completed basic, they kept us pretty busy all the way with training and exercises and physical training and marching and learning all the experiences. And after we got into Fort Hood, why the training was less stringent, and we had more leisure time in the evenings to play poker or whatever, was good for us, writing letters. I wasn't, being married while I was in Texas, I stayed pretty close to base. I didn't go for the entertainment in Juarez or the other Mexican towns where the fellas would go on weekends for their entertainment. Movies were fairly close by in the town of Glen, and once in a while I'd go to a movie with some of the guys, but that was about it.
Did your wife ever come see you?
No, she didn't come see me. She became pregnant on one of my last weekends home from training, and then Why, she was due in June 5th of 1955, and that's when we lost our first baby. I was home on leave for that occasion, and then when I got back, why, I was scheduled to go to Germany, but I didn't have enough time left. I had to have 6 months left then before I could be shipped to Germany, and I didn't have that by a couple of weeks. So I didn't go to Germany, I stayed at Fort Hood.
What was the food like?
Food was good. We had sea rations. Being, non-wartime, we were fed well. We had good cooks that prepared things in various ways. In my last 3 or 4 months, I got to be a cook, and then I got to eat what I wanted, basically. So it was good. I can't complain about the food.
How was the process of getting the food? Like, how did you go about doing that?
Oh, it was, all shipped in. And really, I wasn't in the supply program to know how it got there. We just had our shipments, and they had a regular schedule of meals, what we were supposed to eat.
So did you have to go and eat it in a certain amount of time? Or?
Oh, there would be, like 200 of us in a company, and we had an hour to eat. You didn't want to be the last one in line because you probably had to hurry and eat cold food. Other than that, it was fine.
What did you do on leave?
What did I do on leave? Just come home and spend time with the family. That was about it.
What did you guys do for fun when you came home?
Finally, when I came home, I went back to work on the third day I was home. I was working for American Tile Company in Grand Rapids, installing ceramic tile, tub alcoves, and floors, and Formica countertops. I resumed that, and I took up my GI Bill, which the government helped me with. I had $135 a semester for a month for that, and I had to maintain a 12 credit hours in college, and I was doing that all at night school plus working my 45 hours a week on that. So,
how did you choose your career?
How did I choose my career? I guess I was interested in construction, and I took the courses that would apply to my degree in construction. I had already completed 2 years of college when I went in, and I had started out as a forestry major, didn't like that because there wasn't enough money in it, and I had applied to be a smoke jumper, and I didn't have the ground training, and I couldn't afford to take the ground training on that, which was in Montana. So I stayed and worked locally through the summers and paid my own way through school.
Do you recall the day that your service ended?
I recall the day that my service ended fine. It was boring up till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were in the process of mustering out and just couldn't wait to get to the end of that line and get my papers and be gone. And then we got off base, and I changed my clothes into civilian clothes, and then there were 4 of us that got mustered out on the same day, and we had a fellow from Kalamazoo, a lawyer's son, and he prepared a car for us to drive home with, and he was asked to go and make sure that the car was ready to make the trip from Texas to Michigan, and we told him make sure it's got air in the tires and gas in the tank. And so he went and put air in the tires, and when my turn to drive, I found that it was pulling real hard to the left, and we found he had about 175 pounds of air in one of the tires.
How long were you in the service?
I was in the service exactly 2 years to the hour.
Was anything else besides your education supported by the GI Bill?
No. I tried to later in life, while I was in the service, we were doing firing ranges with our 90 millimeter guns on the tanks, and we had a no fire time, and I went to the front of my tank to make an inspection, and in the process, one of the tanks next to me fired his round, and consequently I'm basically deaf on my left ear and lost 40% of my hearing on my right ear. And in that process, I tried to get a hearing aid from the Veterans Administration through Grand Rapids, and I was denied that request. However, my brother was also in service, and he had gone through rocket training down in Huntsville, Alabama with von Braun, the famous German rocket scientist, and in the process he had some hearing problems also. But he was in New York, and he got his hearing aid for just going in and asking for it. So no problems there, but it wasn't that, I wasn't that lucky.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war, about other, or the military in general?
I can't say as it did. I was glad that I did serve my country, and I was glad to get out, and I really didn't appreciate it probably until about 20 years later when I joined the Legion, and I'm now active, semi-active in that, in the American Legion post here in Grand Rapids or in Lowell. And
what are some of the activities you do?
We march in parades, and we have Veterans Day dinners and that sort of thing. Just kind of a get-together and remembrance.
How did your service life affect your life?
I guess my service life gave me a chance to, grow up and mature. My racial relations with, at that time, segregation was very popular yet, and we had some colored folks in our outfit that were, you didn't even know they were colored. They were friendly, honest, true, good soldiers. But we had others, if they got dust on their shoe, it was because somebody had, racially offended them on that. And one particular sergeant we had was very racial in his activities, and he would he would apply his race and want special privileges all the time from everybody else. And in the process, one night he was a sergeant of the guard, and 3 of the fellows went into his private room and nailed his bed and his chairs and his table to the ceiling. And when he came back, he was very upset. And it was probably a month before he would come back to the barracks again, even, because he figured he was going to lose it. Well, he eventually did die while we were on maneuvers. It was cold in Louisiana, and he laid on the back end of the tank where we had an auxiliary engine, a little engine to keep our batteries going in the tank, to keep radio communication. And he laid down too close to that, covered himself up with a blanket, and was asphyxiated on his own.
Did you make any friendships?
Oh yeah, we were. I had a good friend, Jerry Postumus from Alto. We went in together and we came out together. And there were Don Fox from 100th Street in Alto. We went through our basic training and everything. And there were other good friends that we had that we played poker with. And that was our entertainment, being together. There was a bond between soldiers.
What was your fondest memory that you always think of?
From service?
From service.
From service. Golly. I guess fondest memory was getting out.
Anything other than that?
Other than that, I can't say as there's any real one specific standout item on it. It was a great experience. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but at the time, I can't say I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy the camaraderie and the training that I was given, and it has helped me throughout my life.
Could you tell us about your court-martial?
My court-martial amounted to the fact that I was on guard duty. It was May. We had to wear our winter uniforms until Memorial Day, and this was about a week before Memorial Day. Our motor pool was about as far away from the guardhouse as you could possibly get. It was about 250 yards, I would say, across the motor pool, and my job was at the far north gate to check the trip tickets to make sure anybody taking the vehicle out was authorized to do so. The company next to us had a nice little guard shack where you could sit in the shade, but our company only had a small rock sitting by the gate. And it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was sitting on that rock and very sick. I had lost my lunch just about 2:30, and a Jeep come driving up, and I got up and asked, for the paperwork, and it happened to be the officer of the day, and he was checking on the guards, and he said, "Soldier, I see you sitting down. You're not supposed to be sitting down on guard duty." And I said, told him I was very sick, and if he wanted to see my lunch, he could look at it behind a rock. And he thought that wasn't funny at all. He said, "I'm going to make an example of you," and he set me up for a court-martial. Then I went back to the barracks, and it was probably a week later. We were on maneuvers in the field, running a small attachment or a little problem course, and they called me out of the tank and asked me to come to this armored personnel carrier. "We're going to hold your court-martial here." So I went in, and the officers quizzed me, and the accusing officer was there, and he told me what I had done. And I explained my situation, and I was given 30 days restriction and a $30 fine. However, one of the friends I knew was stationed in the battalion headquarters, and somehow or other that never did get on my records. So that was the extent of that.
What advice would you give future servicemen?
Do what you're told and do the best job you can. That's about the extent I can say on that. It's do what you're told. That keeps you out of trouble.
Do you have anything else to add to this interview?
Well, I don't know. Is there anything else you'd like to know?
Yeah.
I guess I have a few pictures. The lower left-hand picture, my left-hand picture here is myself and Jerry Postumus from Alto in our basic training or so. And in the upper corner here, there is a tank that was just fired. And you can see the fire flash coming out the barrel of the gun, of the 90mm gun. While I was in service in basic training, we also had to maintain. We were shaved when we went in, and we had to maintain our haircuts, and about every week we had to give a haircut. So I didn't like paying $1 out of my wages, which was about, I believe, about $90 a month that I got paid. And I didn't want to keep spending money to be satisfied in the Army. So I rode home and I got my barber equipment that my mother used to cut my hair. So in the process, I told Jerry Postumus to tell everybody that I was a barber back home. So I set up and cut his hair, and he said he was satisfied, and he got it. So this is a picture of me cutting Don Fox's hair from 100th Street. He now lives in Freeport, and I see him at Myers every once in a while. But I was sending more money home from cutting hair than I was making. I would get 50 cents pay cash and $1 payday, and I would set up a little desk at the end of the pay line, so I would get it before they run out of money. So that was about the extent of that. This is one of my wedding pictures, and that was July 10th, 1954, that I was married. And I guess there's a couple other pictures of my tank here. I didn't find the ones where we got stuck in maneuvers in Louisiana, and there was a colored family come by us. We couldn't run on roads. We had to run in the streams, or adjacent to when we were running maneuvers. And I was in Able Company, and one of the other companies had gone through, and there was a stream about the size of Cherry Creek here in Lowell, and it got muddy, and it was steep banks on both sides, and my tank got stuck in the bottom, and the banks were slippery. I couldn't get the tank out. So we were held there for probably 3 days, and it was raining all the while. And this colored family come by, and he was going on his way to church. So he told us, to just hang by. He'd come back and start us a fire so we could dry our stuff out. And he did. He came back, started a pine stump into fire for us so we could dry out. And then he came along and he had a gallon of wine that he wanted, a gallon of pluck, he called it. And he wanted us to buy that for $1. So we were more than happy to buy that for $1 and ease our pain while we were waiting to be rescued. They came in 3 days later after the maneuvers were over and pulled our tank out of the creek bed. But we were wet and soaked, most of that 3 days. So, is there anything else I can answer?
Did you receive any awards?
I received a sharpshooter award when I was in basic training with an M1 rifle. The rifle, we had a 30 caliber carbine in the tank, and our personal weapon was a 45 millimeter pistol. Other than that, no awards on that. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Very good. I appreciate it. Several of the pictures we have, and in our relaxed time when we weren't doing anything else and everybody else was taking a cigarette break, I wasn't smoking, so I would find a place to relax on the wheels of the tank. This was our entrance, one of the side entrances into Fort Knox, and this is just a couple buddies that I would bum around with, and that was my 50 Ford in the background. These are our platoon from basic training at Fort Knox. This was Jerry, or myself, and Don Fox when I was cutting his hair. Variations showing the tank in a different direction. That was me with my dress uniform on, getting ready for a parade. This is another view of the tank from the back side. That's the way we would drive our tanks, with the driver sitting right behind me under the turret. That would be about the extent of my pictures.
Okay, and now could you explain the items in the front right here?
The items in the front. This is the 4th Armored Division that I ended up with at Fort Knox, and that was my first PFC when I had completed my tank training and had initially gone to Fort Hood, Texas. This was a medal that we wore on our hats just to signify that we were in the Armored Division. This was just a battalion emblem. I graduated or got out of service as a specialist 3rd class because they were changing from stripes to this sort of ornament when I was in service. This is a U.S. signature which was supposed to be polished up on real bright brass, and it was supposed to be worn on the straps on your shirt or coat.
Explain what this is right here.
This is my degree from Michigan State. As I stated in the interview, I went to state on a GI Bill. I had 2 years of college, and in 1953 I couldn't go anymore, so I was drafted. I got out in 1956, and I took night classes from Michigan State, or from JC, as long as I could, and then I had to commute from Lowell to Michigan State for 5 terms to get my degree. And in 1961, I got my degree from state, and the disappointing fact was nobody ever wanted to see it until you folks now. Thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Thank you for everything.
The following oral military history project is a series of documentaries in association with the Lowell area men and women who proudly served and sacrificed part of their lives to preserve the opportunities for all of us to build our businesses and raise our families under a blanket of freedom. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.